In this video, I want to talk about Logan. Movie doesn't come out for several months. I think it comes out on March the 3rd, I think it is. But I saw the first preview or the first trailer of this movie, and I was very impressed by what I saw in the trailer. This movie apparently will star Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. I think this will be the final time that he'll portray Wolverine in the X-Men series. Many people were disappointed with X-Men Apocalypse. It only made, last time I checked, only $500 something million worldwide, as opposed to its predecessor, Days of Future Past, which made something like $700 or $800 million or something. I think about $800 million. So it was a significant drop off. And I think there's three main reasons for that. Number one, I think after the first week, word of mouth was that Hugh Jackman really wasn't in this movie, apart from that brief cameo that he had as Weapon X. I think that was probably the main reason. I think another reason is that this movie, Apocalypse, that is, didn't feature some of the mainstays, whether it's not that character, was portrayed as a younger person, or they just hadn't been existing yet. You didn't see Bobby in this movie for obvious reasons. You didn't see Halle Berry portray Storm, maybe because of age or whatever. But also, actually, she was portrayed as a younger girl, so that would make sense. But different people weren't in this movie. And also, I think people who are fans of the comic book, who really were fond of this movie, were probably disappointed at the portrayal of Apocalypse. He was okay. I liked X-Men Apocalypse, but I think that Apocalypse has powers where you can't really have a person portray him like a human. Like, Apocalypse is this larger than life character. Apocalypse is eternal. Apocalypse is indestructible. But anyway, Oscar Isaac, I think that's the guy's name. He did an okay job. I just think Apocalypse should have been a CGI, like almost robot type guy, robot character. And also, he didn't have the traditional celestial suit that he normally wears. He had this sort of weird Egyptian type garb on, and I don't know. But Logan appears to be a different movie, a different beast. Number one, from what I've read, a little bit about it, it's a much darker film. And for the first time in the movie's the history of this franchise, it's a rated R movie. You will hear the F-bomb in this movie. It appears to be a little bit more gory. In one of the shots for this movie, you see Wolverine's claw go through someone's skull. And let me focus on Wolverine for a second. Now, in this movie, Wolverine appears much older. He has gray hair. The movie is set in the year 2024. And in the trailer, to you guys, because it's on YouTube, the trailer, you'll see Wolverine looking older and more broken down. And there's a shot where he's in the mirror and you see scars all over his back. And that doesn't make sense, right? Because, wait a minute, he has X Factor. Not X Factor, excuse me. Healing Factor. And apparently what I've read, and the director confirmed this, is that, not to me, but in an interview, what's going on is that Wolverine's been alive since, 1840 something? And after nearly 200 years of living, Wolverine's healing factor is finally starting to break down. So what's happening is he still heals, but it may be he may be healing slower, or I'm not sure about whether it's slowed down. I think it's either slowed down a bit, or he still heals fast, relatively speaking, but it may be slowing down. And also what's happening is that as he heals or regenerates, instead of like smooth tissue being replaced as it was originally formed, scar tissue is forming over it. So his healing factor is starting to decline. I'm surmising that since his healing factor is declining, then since that's declining, then all the other ailments that he's like, but his body's been able to suppress. Because remember, this is a guy who's been exposed to radiation. I'm starting to think that these things are starting to creep into his body now, like, illnesses that had been at bay for a while because of his immune system. This is a guy who never got sick. This is a guy who never, had any type of maladies, really. He didn't know what it was like to be human. Now he might be understanding what it's like to be human. Also, I think since his healing factor has declined, I think the aging process is starting to speed up in him. That's probably why he looks older. Wolverine probably was perpetually always 35 years old or something. Now, all of a sudden, he's 50. You see what I'm saying? Also, from what I understand, he's developed a drinking problem in this movie. Like I said, I don't know all the details of this movie. I'm just telling you what I have been able to observe so far. Virtually all the mutants that we've come to see are dead. Like I said, in the comic strip, what happened was Logan was tricked by, what was it, Mysterio? I'm kind of terrible with some of these villains' names, but the one that can mess with your mind. He was tricked into thinking that his fellow X-Men were villains, and he massacred his teammates, not realizing until it was too late that he had personally killed every one of his teammates, like Cyclops and Rogue and Storm, and he was so devastated by what he did, being tricked into that he became a pacifist, swore off ever becoming violent again in his life, and he just would not, he was so scarred by what he did. And he got married and had a family and You had to read the comic strip because it's not about. I don't think this movie is totally based on the comic strip, but I think it's. Well, how can I say this? It's not totally verbatim based on the comic book, but I think some of the storylines is based on Old Man Logan. And all the mutants appear to be dead, and for some reason, mutations seem to be declining. I have read that. The only other mutant that I see in this movie is Charles Xavier. He appears much, much older, and he's portrayed by Patrick Stewart in this movie, not the younger actor that had taken over for the role. He appears to be much, much older. Now Patrick Stewart in real life is a very healthy 70-year-old man or something like. I know he's in his 70s, but he's very healthy. But he's portraying Charles Xavier as even older than he is. If I had to take a guess, Charles Xavier is somewhere in his 90s. He looks very emaciated. He has a gray beard. And he looks much older. He's very weak. And I suspect, because there's a scene where Logan has a shovel as if he's burying someone, I suspect that Charles Xavier expires somewhere toward the middle or latter part of this film. The only other mutant that I see is a little girl who is told by Charles Xavier that she's much like him, very, very much like him. And I suspect that, and most people that I read who follow the X-Men comic strip suspect that she's I think it's called X-23, who in contemporary comic books is Logan's replacement as Wolverine. She has virtually every ability that Wolverine has, except for, instead of just 3 claws that extend out of her hands, I think she has 2 claws that come out of her hands or fingers, 1 to 2, and 2 that come out of each feet or each foot. So I don't know. Like I said, I really haven't seen too much more revealed. The trailer just came out, but I think this is going to be perhaps, because I don't think Fox is doing this movie, and Fox really has fucked up these movies. Like, to be honest with you, I really haven't liked too many of these movies after the first two. After the original X-Men that came out in 2000 and X2, I think it came out in 2002 or 3, one of the two. I haven't really liked a lot of these movies. I did like X-Men First Class with Kevin Bacon. I did like Days of Future Past. I think it was one of the better ones. X-Men Apocalypse was okay, but I didn't like X-Men. I didn't like Origins too much. I couldn't. Wolverine was pretty good when he was in Japan, but I don't know. I didn't like the ending part of the movie too much. You know what I mean? There were certain parts of the movie I just didn't like too much. You know, but I think the worst one, and most people agree with this, is X-Men: The Last Stand. That was just stupid. But this movie, I think, looks to be different in this franchise. I think that Hugh Jackman will close out his role beautifully. This will probably be the last time we see him, at least in a larger capacity, play Wolverine. And it's about time too. I mean, because we gotta be honest, he's 49 years old, and he can't keep playing him forever. But I think this is going to be the best one out of all of the X-Men movies, especially if you're a fan of Wolverine. But tell me what you guys think about Wolverine, X-Men, and, you know, if you're a fan of the X-Men and you're a fan of the series, the movies, you're looking forward to this movie, and just tell me what your thoughts are.